Hello, everyone. This is Rick Morgan. I'm your friendly neighborhood comic book scientist. I am going to have a live stream tonight, well, a recorded stream, with two guests. One is the hobby hero, is Charles Mathis. He's an artisan and an aficionado of comic books who likes to clean and press his books. And then we got a professional comic presser, who's Barry Brager. He is the owner and uh, artisan from comicpresser.com, and we're going to talk about cleaning and pressing comics tonight. And I want to welcome both of you. This is our friend hobby hero, it's Charles, and we have Barry. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So introduce yourselves, please, starting with Charles, and what do you do and how'd you get started, and what's your goal?
I've got a YouTube channel here, kind of encompass, all the hobbies that I like, but specifically, focusing on comic cleaning and pressing. For me, it was kind of a journey out of necessity. Started to look at grading comics and what was required. Had submitted some comics, wasn't real happy with the results. And what was possible on like the generic side of like the comic pressing. So I started looking for more advanced and kind of aggressive cleaning techniques, which actually led me to your channel. And then, one short message of will you clean my books for me? And no, kind of led me down the path and I figure out how to do this for myself. So joined, a lot of groups, watched every video I could, read every book I could, to try to kind of piece together the processes that have really gotten me to the results that I'm able to get now. And, for me, being able to take these, collectibles and, take years and years of, love off of them to get them kind of back to that showroom, kind of quality is super gratifying and really what keeps me trying to take in that next step and improve the processes.
Great. Thank you so much. Barry, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Barry from comicpresser.com. I sort of started out as a collector and then became a dealer, started buying to support my habit. And after that, just started to realize that the difference between paying market value for a collection and selling it for a higher market value was cleaning and pressing. There was the upgrading of the collection, and expertly curating it, organizing it in a way that people really appreciated. And so, working with I've got a couple great partners, and a lot to them along the way. It's encouraged my pressing and started making videos and stuff before. I have some old trailers on YouTube, started selling videos and trying things. But I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I went to art school. I'm an entrepreneur in practice. I do a lot of work with scientists and inventors like Rick and others, and innovators like Charles. And so just love being around those people. So the comic pressing gig is sort of a place where I have found I can be an artist and a scientist and a business person all at the same time. And
a nerd too.
Sorry?
You can be a nerd at the same time.
Be a nerd. Well, I live vicariously through the books of others. So I don't have to own them. I only want to just experience them for a while. And so this actually gives me an opportunity to meet great people and enjoy what's in their collections and add value to it and build relationships along the way. So glad to be here.
Great, thanks. So I'm just going to leave this open and sort of free form. I know there's a few things we wanted to talk about. And one of the things I wanted to make sure we didn't forget to talk about was blue versus purple labels, restored versus not restored. And I want to be the first to say, I'll just open this up by saying that I contacted Charles initially because he had a book that had a purple label returned to him. He said it was a surfactant and it had I think a B1 grading or something, a purple label. And that was my first, and I suspected it was one of my products, or I was concerned that it was one of my products. And actually Barry was the one who told me about it. And I said, he said I should reach out to him and find out more, because that's the first I had heard about this type of restored grade, or potential of using the Immaculate to get a purple. It was my first experience with it. And so I wanted to say that, if used improperly as any process, you can get a restored label if you use Immaculate Clean and it removes color. And Immaculate can remove color. There's no case in which it is absolutely color removal proof. I always check for color fastness before I start, and I'm pretty good at not removing color. But that may not be the case with everyone. And Charles, I'd like you to talk a little bit about that so we can just get that off the table first, and then we can have some fun talking.
Sure. And that's the thing. Like, I get a lot of questions about anybody watching the videos too. Like, hey, is this going to get a purple label with CGC? And the reality is the processes themselves will not. There is 0% chance that the processes themselves will do it, because we're not adding anything that they're looking for. Like, CGC doesn't test the paper. They're not, cutting off pieces of the paper, dropping it in solution to see if there's a chemical reaction. Like, they're looking for telltale signs. And if you leave those behind is whenever they're going to find it. And you're only going to leave those behind if you do something wrong. So in that particular instance, yes, the surfactant was used, but the issue wasn't the surfactant. They didn't detect the surfactant. What they detected was the color removal in the spot that was there was the result of somebody cleaning the cover. And that's the only thing they were able to tell if it was submitted again and they didn't happen to see it, or they're, like you said, it was a B1 designation, which means it's basically the lowest amount of color loss that you could have on a purple label. Like, then maybe the next person who sees it's like, that could just be wear off of the surface. So, I mean, that's where purple labels are going to come from in these processes. Are they possible? Yes, but they're not a result of the chemicals or the actual process themselves. It would be, it's not even always going to be user error. Sometimes, the paper just reacts differently in between processes. But I mean, it's a big concern for collectors that are out there. It is a risk you are going to take when you wet clean. You're just adding a lot of variables to that equation. But I've submitted, probably 30 plus books using these processes. I've gotten one conserved label and I've gotten one purple label out of that process. So it's just one of those things where you've got to kind of take the good with the bad, and just acknowledge that there is an element of risk whenever you get to the more abrasive treatments on these books.
Sure. Barry, you have any comments?
Well, yeah. Well, tonight I'll be playing the role of the purple label.
With your purple shirt.
Yeah. So Charles is, of course, the blue label.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
am I the worst label?
Signature series.
Yeah,
it's a great series. What I can say is that everything in pressing and cleaning requires a light touch, and the Immaculate Clean is a product that fills in a niche in the category of removal of debris and grime and dirt in colored areas on comics where it can work. And as such, it's a technique one might use. To do it, it has to be done properly, like any other solvent, of course, water being the most common. And it's not a solvent, right? This gets between the dirt particle and the paper. That's what this does. It doesn't go, it's not going on the paper. It's not going on the dirt. It's surfactant. It gets between both and separates them. It's beautiful when it does what it's supposed to do. So all I can say is that we've never gotten a purple label with Immaculate Clean. Can't say we've tried thousands of times because we use it sparingly, if at all. It's rare that we use Immaculate Clean. We use it for the right things at the right times, but when we need it, it really works. And I have a couple examples we can talk about later. But in particular, I have heard, though, some derision and some discontent from those in the comics community about Immaculate Clean, about wet cleaning in general, and about people who don't know what they're doing, daring to put it on fragile comic surfaces or ruining treasures for the next person or generation. So all I can say is that if any of us want to try it, how we should on our own books. I'm a presser. I have to tell people when I do it. I have to talk to them about it. I have to get their approval. But ultimately, when we do it and we acknowledge with someone that we're trying to get some complicated stain or dirt off, the reward is very good when we succeed, even personally, and is usually not detectable because, again, it is a light touch, a staged activity. And frankly, Immaculate Clean is the smallest ingredient in the recipe. Is usually elbow grease, water, subtract drying, air, heat, and time. So there's a lot that goes into the process, believe it or not. Maybe it's too complicated, but I don't think so. But I do think that if we just take this stuff, like any stuff, and put it on our thing, move it around, and hope for great results, we're not going to get it. So I'm just excited to be talking about how to get more blue labels in this world, since that's what the market values and what collectors value, and how to do it with tools like Rick is willing to put out in the world, where when I need to have a tough stain or a tough surface that I'm trying to perfect, this could be a tool in the toolbox, when used appropriately, can get me a clean surface, a happy collector, and a pleased grader. That's what I'm looking for.
Sounds good. It sounds like this should be on a National Geographic channel for comic pressers. I think Barry would be the host. I love that voice of his. I'm going to leave the floor open. Barry, you have a couple images you can ask me to show now or later. Charles, if you want to share anything, I want to like to just freeform this for a while, and I don't want to take up too much mic time. I want you guys to have some time in the sun.
Sure. Well, I think whenever you talk about stuff like wet cleaning, like there's a definite learning curve when it comes to wet cleaning. I think a lot of people jump into dry cleaning, and regular comic pressing, you need, $150, $200 to get started. It's a fairly straightforward process. Once you figure out your temperatures, you're not, bricking your books on your modern books. Like, it makes it feel like it's a very easy process. And that transition from dry cleaning and pressing to that wet cleaning, humidifying and pressing is a bigger leap than I think a lot of people think. And I think that's where you get into problems with the wet cleaning side of it, is you get a lot of people are asking questions on how to do it. And one of my biggest failures, in my journey to figuring out wet cleaning was, when my first book I ever humidified, I didn't put anything over the top of it, and the condensation dripped down on it, left water stains all over the inside of the book. I took probably a book that potentially could have been a 9.2 down to a 7.5 with all the extra rinsing that I did afterwards to get the stains out of the book that I had added to it. And learning things like, you talk about that soft touch, like how much pressure to apply when you're wiping off dirt off of a comic cover that is wet is a big skill to learn. And you can't just say, hey, light, because light is different for everybody. So, I mean, you see that stain there, you see it getting lighter, and your tendency is to, go like an eraser and take it an extra swipe. And then that's when you get your color loss. And I think that's what a lot of people, they want that ability to wet clean their books. And I know Rick has mentioned it in a lot of his videos, and I mention it in pretty much every one of mine. Like, if you're going to try these processes, have some sacrificial lambs. Like, you need books that you're going to mess up, because ultimately you're going to have to learn those skills. There's not a way to teach them. You're going to have to figure out, okay, this is one too many treatments. This is, a little bit too long in the humidity chamber. This is a little too many times to wipe on a spot. And some stains aren't going to come out. And that's stuff that you can only learn with through experience, and you can't just hop on, forum and be like, oh, what temperature did you press that at? I'm like, well, I mean, on my press for this exact book, for this exact amount of time that I humidified it, I did this temperature, this time. But the book you have at your house, that
where your ambient pressure and relative humidity and temperature are different, right?
Right.
All these things are different.
I
bought a stack of alpha flights one time.
Right.
I bought a huge pile of alpha flights and a bunch of those. They weren't worth anything, right?
Yeah. But people don't understand like that next level. And I think that's where a lot of the heartache and the concern with a lot of these wet products, wet cleaning processes and products comes in is, hey, I either did use it and got horrible results because I just tried to mimic what I saw in a very specific scenario, or I'm so afraid to use them because of what the result could produce, that, rather than trying to learn the craft, I'll just say it's not necessary, that you shouldn't do it. Whatever convenient excuse makes it to where other people aren't out there trying to learn the skill themselves.
I think it's tough when you talk about wet cleaning. If you haven't done it, you looked at it, you heard of it, how interesting or crazy or useful is it? All I can say is that there's two reasons to use wet clean. One is you want to clean the entire book surface. It's dirty. The second thing is you want to do spot cleaning. You want to clean a spot on the book that is dirty. If you're not cleaning a spot or you're not cleaning a surface, no reason to use wet cleaning at all on a comic, as I see it. When you want to clean a surface, you're taking more risk than when you want to clean a spot because there's more to cover and you have more variation, right? All these comics are very, from all these periods of all these papers, all these things, they're very, so even if I'm talking Marvel books, Marvel Silver Age, or I'm talking Marvel Moderns or DC, this there, Fawcett and Avon, who knows? It all varies. But ultimately, the process is very general in art conservation. The first thing you do is you start with water and you start in a tiny spot and you figure out, am I going to lose color if I apply my solvent, which right now is water, I mean, this hypothetical, to my spot, and I need to pick a spot that's not right in the center of the eye, and also that that is similarly treated to where I'm going to work, meaning it's got the same ink coverage or same color, something like that, same damage if a book's partially damaged. But once you know if you're going to clean the spot or the whole book, you have to take different precautions because when the whole book surface starts to get wet, it buckles, it moves, it shifts. And so you have to be prepared to work quickly when your book is wet to A, solve the problem you're trying to solve, and B, deal with anything that happens in the middle of it. Like you're rubbing, oh, a color came off. Like you got to change, for some people who do alpine skiing, right? That's their thrill, going downhill and at high speed and facing death and then surviving and enjoying the lodge at the end of the day. For those of us who do cleaning and pressing, we are in the middle of a wet book and we just did something wrong. Now, are we still going to pull a 9.4 out of this thing? Only seconds make the difference, right? And like, that's a thrill. Back of your neck starts sweating, the hair stands up, right? Can I do it? I mean, that's nerding out on this stuff. But ultimately, that's what happens. So when you're wet cleaning, you don't want to be in a seriously underprepared nerd out situation. And so what I've tried to do is I've tried to use Rick's products responsibly for the right situations. And most importantly, comic presser is about scale. It's not about one presser, one person, the artistry of an individual. It's about growing. And so we've actually made training materials internally to help show other people how to clean with this stuff. So today, what I thought, sent Rick a couple pictures. What I thought I'd do is I just talk about, before he shows them, I sent two pictures. It's more complicated looking than the other. The first picture is for that totally dirty book surface, for that beautiful bronze X-Men that you're trying to get perfect. There's some work in that. I'll explain what this is. Then there's the second one, Rick, if you can just flash up the second picture for a minute. This one's a simpler process because it's for getting that hideously ugly fingerprint you see on the spine off the back of that beautifully glossy book. Now, if you just take the picture away from it, Rick, right? Something I've watched, like Charles, watched every video I can, read every book, go back to the papers. I'm pleased. I've learned from the recent comic stain removal book. I've learned from wonderful YouTubers like Charles and Rick, other people who can't mention all their names, people who've been doing it for a long time. One person like ETA Nick, if you know this fellow, I've never met him. I know he's just stopped YouTube, but there's a whole chain of stuff he's done. The best technique I ever found to remove fingerprints was from ETA Nick, who said to blow on the book. The steam from your breath and the enzymes in your saliva that you're steaming on that book is really the best way to pull up those fingerprints, is what he showed. I'm huffing on books all the time trying to get it. Immaculate has really helped us in some cases create just a wipe that gets that fingerprint off that book. And, many times, not only does CGC flag you for cleaning, they flag you for eraser streaks. They flag you for divots in your pressing. And they flag you for the way you handle fingerprints. And so all these defects, anything that ruins the surface light is something that, you can improve. So when Immaculate can improve the way raking light goes across a surface, I'm trying to make a greater giggle, and that's what we're doing. So, anyway, I'm gonna go turn back to Charles and Rick for a minute, but if we want to talk about it, I can just walk through what those pictures are that we quickly pulled up, or we can keep talking about the hobby and the challenges in general of getting that clean.
Now that you've whetted my appetite, I want you to go over these pictures in general, unless you have an objection, Charles.
I told him it was they're too complex without instructions for me. So
right. So let me just explain what you're looking at here. So I've seen some. Again, I've looked at the comments on Immaculate where I can find them online. Some people are I love it. And some people, make fun of it. They call it makeup pad cleaning. Okay. By the way, we don't always use makeup pads. There are many more professional 100% cotton wipes that are used, but this is what's common. I just use it to make an illustration for other people on my team so I could put it in a picture. But essentially, working left to right, okay, there's a makeup pad there. It says mix, and it's got a little Saturn ring with an arrow. And you just stir that stuff around. Rick has careful instructions in the PDF on his website. When you buy the stuff, you mix it. It's sold as a concentrate. It's easier for him to make it. It's easier for him to ship it. There's a burden on the user to mix this with water. So he provides the tools to do it. That's a little graduated cylinder. It came with the MacuClean. You mix your stuff up. The next thing you do is you get a little tiny drop of it and you test it in the right spot. This is a really cool Q-tip. It's kind of got a flat end on one side and a nice pointed end on the other. I think actually Shelby Comics. I think I saw him use those on a YouTube video. Just try to give credit where credit's due these things. I learn from everybody, take what I can. Anyway, I like these Q-tips. Do a little test, right? That's an arrow pointing to a spot on that pad. Then you get some ImmacuClean on your thing, but we don't get a lot of ImmacuClean on these wipes, right? And by the way, this whole thing is for this dirty bronze book you see turned around. The whole thing is covered with just schmutz, as I would say. And so you get a little dollop of this ImmacuClean in the middle. The rest of the wipe is dry, and the center has that little bit of ImmacuClean. So it's some concentrate there. The rest is dry because you do need friction to make ImmacuClean work its best, and that's the challenge. You need abrasiveness without removing the too abrasive. You have to get across only what's known as the sizing of the paper. The paper itself has a coating on it. You cannot break the coating on the paper. Understanding how paper is made helps you better appreciate how far you can go down in that paper before you're violating it. Of course, all this assumes you're not dealing with water-based inks. Okay, you need oil-based inks or the basis of the ink that was used. Otherwise, the water-based inks, you'll be diluting it. Okay, and so actually newer, very modern books, these beautiful, slick books, many of them are printed with eco-smart inks, which are water-based, so they run. Anyway, there's arrows drawn on these things. I'm showing that on these full surface books, when I use that dollop of ImmacuClean, I'm rubbing in light circles. I typically rub from the center of the book out. I'm holding it down. I don't wear gloves. Okay, and just so you know, when I do it, other people do. Then you can't just use ImmacuClean. It's wipe on, wipe off. The moment you put on the ImmacuClean, you have to take it off with water. And that's what the H2O is. There's a pad of that, but the water is different. That's got a little dotted line around the perimeter of that pad. I get that pad wet all the way out, but not with a glump of water. It's like a mist. Okay. So I have this misted, wet, damp pad. Okay. And when I rub that on the comic, I'm rubbing it from the center out like a clock. I'm following the numbers of a clock. So I'm wiping in circles with the ImmacuClean, but I'm wiping in rays from the center out with the water. And then to the far right, it says dry. And then the dry has other arrows pointing at 45-degree angle. When I dry the book, so first I use ImmacuClean, I get off what I can. I never get all the dirt off. You cannot get it off in the first pass. So don't even try. Can't be done. You get off what you can. You get it loose. You get the water to pull off the streaks. All this without breaking the sizing of the paper or your toast. And then you rub a third angle. So circles for ImmacuClean, outward rays with the water, and then an angular stroke with the drying, trying not to create streaks in any one direction is what you're trying to do. When that's done, you have a book that's partially clean, partially wet, and partially dry. So what do? You got to press that thing to get it flat, not let it wrinkle, not let it shrink, anything. Once you press it, the book's partially clean. After that, ImmacuClean is off and we don't come back to it. It's like taking that first layer off, which is great. We still have to erase around those tiny words next to the Lego truck and within the O and the word you see there. And we still have to do all that fine work. We just use erasers for that. I don't only use a block eraser, which I've drawn on there in this image, but that's the erasing stage. That picks up the rest. So ImmacuClean gets those big layers off on large, big, dirty surfaces. Then we clean it. We first ImmacuClean, then water, then dry. Then we erase it. Then again, there could still be streaks. We rake this thing in the light. We move it back and forth under the light to make sure there's no streaks left on the book. The streaks are clumps of dirt, the streaks of dirt that were picked up by the fluids and left in a row, which is unnatural. It's not chaotically distributed as you would see dirt randomly sprayed everywhere. That's why you got to wipe it again. Again, with water, we wipe with sort of from the center out. And then when we dry the second time, we're not wiping at an angle, we're wiping in circles, slowly buffing, like the outside of a car. And so that picture you show, again, that's internal training material. I'm just showing it to you. all our processes are like this at Comic Presser. We're trying to scale the business. We're trying to be efficient. We're trying to be careful. And we're trying to know if something went wrong. Where did we go wrong? How'd you do it? Why is that color off? Did you do this? Did you, you skip that? Okay, now we know. Now, somebody has to eat the book or apologize to somebody. Thank goodness we just don't have those problems often, but that's the issue. So I'll stop here for a second, but then we can talk about the second use, which I think is even cooler, which is just getting an annoying, difficult fingerprint off with one stroke.
Well, let me talk with Charles first about his Immaculate Clean, and then we'll do the fingerprint thing. Charles, how do you do it? What do you got, any tips for our viewers?
I mean, for the times that I use it, and to be fair, like with a lot of the processes that I'm doing now, there's so much full cover like cleaning. Like whenever I'm doing books now, there's usually a lot of staining on the books, stuff that Immaculate Clean is not designed to tackle. But a lot of the processes that I'm using to tackle those are also getting a lot of that surface built-in dirt out. So I really haven't had those opportunities to use it. I think honestly that Purple Label book was one of the last books that I had used it on because the cover was just so filthy. Before I even took it to the other steps, I wanted to get the cover cleaned with the Immaculate Clean beforehand. So, I mean, you have, and that's kind of what he was talking about, what Barry was talking about earlier. You know, you're talking about, are you trying to clean a spot or are you trying to clean the entire cover of a book? And when you have to make sure you're using the right process for the right objective that you're trying to tackle there. You know, if you've got, you know, I'll get people all the time that'll ask, you know, hey, I've got this, can you dry clean this out? I'm like, I mean, I will dry clean over it, but that is not going to remove any of that stain. You know, I'll be with a white eraser on a back cover that's tanned everywhere, and it's not going to make it any less tan, but I want to make sure I get as much dirt off of that surface as I can to use either light treatment or if I'm going to do any of the other more abrasive treatments on it. So I haven't had to go through and do it because I'm not really cleaning books right now where it's an applicable step. You know, they're either not dirty enough to where they need Immaculate Clean, you know, modern books that, you know, are basically just getting the waviness pressed out of them, or maybe a corner ding to where it's all just pressing issues, or they're so far gone that, you know, Immaculate Clean is not going to, you know, shine up that proverbial, you know, dud of a book what it needs to do. So it would just be adding another step, another opportunity for me to, you know, accidentally wipe some cover off the color off the cover in those processes. So it's one of those things where it's got to be the right tool for the job. If you find yourself not comfortable going into like stain removal, if that is too treating an entire book, and there's some crazy stuff out there too that I've seen. I think that's another reason why wet cleaning gets a bad rap, is there's some really bad information out there on the internet. For every channel like Rick's that I found, you know, probably 10 channels of people that were absolutely just destroying books in the name of, you know, pressing, and you know, they've got thousands of views on these videos, and you got to take the good with the bad. But if you're not going to start tackling books that have large water stains, if you're not going to start tackling books that have foxing, dust shadows, stuff like that, and you're really just focusing on, hey, these books are dirty, these books are not something that you're going to get all the dirt off with a white eraser because there's lots of color. I mean, you know, I talk about it in pretty much every video I do, because every book from like the golden age on has yellows and reds all over the cover, and you can't do anything to those. Like you can barely touch them with a dry cotton round without pulling color off of them. So like when you talk about, hey, I've got a spot sitting right in the middle of, you know, the cover on an Amazing Spider-Man 129, which is all yellow and red, and you're like, well, I can't touch this with an eraser at all. You know, where am I going to be able to come at this from? And having something, a mild surfactant to come in and be able to work on top of those covers is a huge benefit in those instances. But that's the thing too. Like, I will say this, Rick, you are way smarter than I am when it comes to the chemical reaction side of this, and the solvent itself. It comes, obviously concentrated, and I think that may be one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people is they want to put more in the solution than they're supposed to. They're like, hey, if a little bit of the surfactant can take a little bit of the dirt off, then a lot of the surfactant could take a lot of the dirt off. And I think that, I'll be honest, I watched one of your videos to figure out the concentration, and I have my calculator out. I'm trying to follow you like with the plans. I'm like, I figured it out. I'm like, I think I'm going to add a little bit of extra water just in case I had the mix off. But you've got to do it right. I mean, you're talking about a soap basically that you're putting on there, and if you have too much on there, Barry mentioned, like, you get streaks, and you can see it visibly on the book when it dries, if you use too much of it on there. And that's, again, where you have to educate people, let them know, like, hey, there's too much of a good thing when it comes to this product. It is a product where the water is going to be doing its part, and the part of Immaculate Clean that's in there is going to do what it needs to do, but you're not going to increase the results by increasing the density.
I'll make a couple comments and I'll pivot to Barry because he's got me eager to hear his parts. But there's a thing called a critical micelle concentration, right? Each surfactant is got some in water at certain temperatures, size of micelles, and that concentration, it has to be in that range to make the micelles, or you're rubbing soap around the book. That's it. You can't be above it or below this range, or you won't make micelle. Second thing, there's a thing called the HLB constant, which is the hydrophile lipophile coefficient, right? Most soaps want as wide of a range as you can. It cleans the most stuff off. I make a lot of cleaners and things like that. It's a hobby of mine. I do it. This one has a very narrow one. It's like, it would be the world's worst soap if you tried to market it, because it has a very, very, very narrow range HLB. And so because of that, it's targeted to just do this, and it doesn't smell great. It's not particularly pleasant to look at. It's brown. It doesn't look like it would be a very good cleaner, but it's designed for this targeted purpose. It's not a breakthrough in science. It's probably the world's worst soap, but it's good for this one application.
Rick, in plain language, tell us what you took, because you've told me. What did you target? It's the soap is designed to clean what?
Sebum. It's the oils left over from your hands and body. And when we see dirt on a book, we think the dirt's stuck on the book, but the dirt's actually stuck in sebum from your oils and hands.
Rick created fingerprint remover.
Yeah, because fingerprints are often...
He's a great scientist, but and of course he's got more YouTube followers than you and me put together, Charles. So he's certainly a great marketer too. But what I would say is there's still room to improve. Rick has, I'm just telling the community, Rick's the Immaculate Clean. If you try to use it to clean golden age books or the solid back of something until it's clean, you'll wet it or destroy it before it ever gets clean with one pass or whatever you're trying to do. Rick always says, wet paper is weak paper. You'll weaken the paper and destroy it long before you clean it, because this stuff is not strong. It is reliable. What needs to happen is you need to know when to use it and how. Well, what we've found is that it's actually better for fingerprints, but not on all modern age books. See, because gloss on a book comes from different things. Sometimes that gloss is from the coating on the paper. Other times that gloss is from the chemistry of the ink. And yet other times that gloss is from a varnish, a separate coating. That may be either a gloss varnish or a matte varnish. Coming from a history as a graphic designer and somebody who has been in the professional printing and packaging industry for many years before I did that pivot in the internet era, long when I was a brunette. Okay. So at the time, right? But I say understanding how paper works is really important. You can't just take a modern shiny book or a modern gloss book, a beautiful, Punisher cover, and just put water on it. You'll take the ink right off, because that shininess is the ink itself, but it's water-based ink. It's really eco-smart ink. And so you're going to remove the ink. But if that thing has a varnish, like it's a gloss-bound square cover with fingerprints all over it, now you can wipe that all day long, because the varnish actually lets you not hurt the paper under it. And so understanding how your gloss, how your surface was engineered, helps you engineer a surface redesign. And so what we use Immaculate for the most, you can put the picture over it, is finding surfaces that are not totally, this is actually pretty weak paper, to be honest with you. This is very flimsy paper you see. You don't really see them. But I just put that ugly, hideous fingerprint on it you may be able to see because it's so annoying and jarring to the collector and the grader. For this, you just mix it up, you test a corner, you make sure you're not going to take color off, and you might. I mean, we literally test the edge, the thickness of the edge to see if we're pulling anything off. And we're doing it under a mag lamp, right? So, I mean, we're testing the littlest thing possible, just with water, by the way, first. First, we test it with water, then we test it with Immaculate. Only then do we put a tiny little dollop. And in this drawing here, you see there's like arrows pointing only at horizontally across the Immaculate wipe. We're just literally wiping it, swiping it right across the street. Wipe, gone. Everything else is then buffing it out. So you take the fingerprint, you substitute it with a little wet streak, and then you got to buff that thing out. The moment you do it on this fragile paper, it's going to wrinkle. You have to get that pressed right away and get that nice and flat. It can be cold pressed. It does not actually have to be hot pressed at this stage because it'll dry flat. But ultimately, we use a little warmth. Now, Rick in the past, Rick, you can take the picture down for me. Rick in the past has talked about, in his instructions, he recommends warming the book. Just so you know, we do not do that. Rick, you can do it. It's fine. We don't do that. If you warm a flimsy modern book, it'll immediately start to curl and wave in the ambient air as it cools, and it doesn't behave. We will not do that. One trick we have used, and again, I did my drawings there on circular cotton rounds because Rick's videos show them. A lot of people show it. To be honest, we don't always use it. If you get good cotton wipes, we have a baby wipes warmer. And so you can use a warm wipe. And so you can warm the wipe in the baby wipes warmer, and you make your own little moisturizer in it. And you just basically take a warm wipe and you put it on the book, and that transfers the warmth. It's spot based, right? We're not warming that book. But the moment you change the temperature of a fragile paper surface, the paper reacts. I mean, that instant. And so it's just, you have to move quickly from wet to dry enough to press, in our experience. That's Rick, back to you.
No, that's great. And I'm never going to pretend that I have everything figured out. I'm never going to pretend that I always call myself, I am the comic book scientist, but I always say I'm a student of pressing and cleaning comics. I'm always learning to press and clean comics. And I don't pretend that I have some magic recipe. Everybody, all these artisans are bringing me lots of ideas, as many as I bring to other people. It goes both ways. And I'm happy to learn. I'm happy to entertain advertising other people's products. It does not have to be my products. If you use other people's stuff, I'm fine with it. Please use it. Please mention it all you want. But if you use my stuff, I'm happy with that too. And I'm happy to have constructive criticism to improve my things. I try to create things that I would use myself. And this whole business started because I started doing this myself. And friends of mine asked me, they've seen what work I did on the books. Like, what did you do? So I'll just make you a little tutorial on YouTube and you can see it because they don't live near me. And then they'd say, well, can you send me some of that stuff? I said, well, I only got so much, but I guess I could make you some more. And that just sort of grew around me. And I've told Barry several times that I didn't really pay much attention to it. It was just sort of in the background. And before I know it, it became a business and it blew up and it grew up around me. But I do not pretend, I do not profess to know everything about this. I do not profess to have the best ways. I'm constantly learning more from people like Barry, who calls me a couple times a month and says, hey, this is great, or hey, you're full of crap, this doesn't work at all, whatever he tells me, and I'm happy for it. Do I ever fight you back on it, Barry? I'm always like, yeah, okay.
I think I called you full of crap, but
yeah, I'm just being facetious, but you did say that. But and Charles, I've watched his stuff. I think I can tell he's using my products. Some of them, not all of them. He's probably got lots of sources of information. So I've been spared. I thought I only had.
He's a gentleman. He's a gentleman. He did not call it out. He could have said on his video, I used this branded product and it didn't work for me. He did not do that. And that's why I said, Rick, you should talk to this guy. This guy's real.
You're right. And I want to clear the air about that. And so actually I've been spared. I have like 21 more minutes. I thought I only had like 6, but I'd like to talk about where do you get information, what communities, what YouTube channel, where can another person that doesn't watch my channel, because obviously they're watching this video, get information or products? Like, where do you buy the stuff you buy, and where do you get the information you get? So I mean, a lot of people I'm sure are interested in that. Charles?
So yeah, I mean, you're going to find a lot of information out there. We talked about it a little bit earlier on there, and none of it is all good. And I would caution anybody, if they're watching pressing tutorials, if the channel isn't posting like regular results, I would be very cautious on how much faith you put in the process there. It is very easy to make a tutorial video on how to do something. That does not mean that it's going to produce the results consistently on the back end. So I have learned some things that I've had to unlearn because of just trying to scrap this stuff together. So some things that I would recommend is consume as much as you can, but consume with a cautiously optimistic filter. There are people that are out there that are going to show you. Obviously, I have limited tutorials on mine to show you general processes. It is harder to find some of these materials than you might think. I will get people who will ask me, like where to find certain materials. I actually started to put affiliate links in my videos because I was going to Amazon so often to copy and paste the links for people to find certain wattage bulbs, because the wattage does matter. Finding certain, types of absorbing pads, even like your metal plates. When people will start, like, I use your plates off your site, like, I'm like, you can get them other places. I'm like, but they're already cut. They're already machined. Like, it's just easier to go here and get them than you trying to go into Home Depot or wherever your local place is and try to get this stuff figured out. So, I mean, you're going to have to, like, because it's really easy for me to say, just go watch my videos, go watch Rick's videos, go, when, Barry starts getting, his stuff posted, watch Barry's videos. But you're going to have to figure out where your comfort level is. You're going to have to figure out who, kind of presses that same way that you kind of want to press. Because what I've learned is I can go tell you where I learned all this stuff, but I've changed a lot of the stuff here on my side too. The way I use some of the processes I have are not the way that they were taught to me, but by doing them, with my press, with, my conditions here as far as humidity and, elevation go and all that stuff, like, I've learned what my process produces, what result. I can't sit there and tell you do the exact same thing and it's going to produce those results for you as well. So, that would be mine. If you see something that looks absolutely crazy, look at a couple more videos on the channel. Cause like I said, some of my results videos, like, I mean, full, humility, like, there are some pretty crazy results on some of these that would lead you to believe some things are there. That's why I try to be transparent. That's why I try, like, I mean, I did a whole video on books that were featured on the channel that I never would have normally graded. Like, there was not a financial benefit to grading those books. It was really just a proof of concept. Like, look, I showed you what I did with these books on the channel. Like, look, CGC still grades these type of books. They're not going to send them back to me with a sticker on them with an LOL or anything like that. Like, it's
an LOL grade. Nice try.
Yeah,
it would fit in a square.
Yeah, it almost fit. So you have to be cautious with that. And I mean, and something that you said earlier, Rick, find somebody that is learning. Find somebody, like, when you talk about science, there's no science out there that is permanently settled. Like, it is always constantly discovering. Like, where I was at 6 months ago, if you had shown me like the before and after pictures that I have now, I'd be like, that's just not possible. I've scoured the internet, I've scoured everything that's out there. Like, these results aren't possible right now. And then when you find them, you're like, oh, it's not even that crazy different from what I was doing. Like, it's just, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it produced that result. So, like, you've got to constantly be learning. I still learn. I'll get books from different ages, different, conditions. And you like, okay, well, that didn't work so well on a Silver Age book as it does on a Copper Age book. Or with that level of stain, this process is a little trickier because it leaves more evidence, because it removes too much on a book that's just crazily stained. So maybe I need to do something a little lighter to just kind of blend stuff in. Like, you learn something along the way. If you can't admit that you're wrong in a process, and that's probably a person you need to stay away from. I get lots of comments on the videos. People will push back. They'll challenge the science, and I'm no Rick, but I do know enough about the science of the reaction to understand why it's not doing what they think it's going to be doing to the book. But, you know, have those conversations. If somebody's not willing to kind of show you behind the curtain, it's probably somebody who's just making videos to get views, and they don't really care if you go and torch all your books or submerge them all in a fish tank. But so just be cautious. But I think there's a lot of good content out there, and you really just need to figure out where your level of comfort is and be there. Not everybody's going to be, you know, hobby hero. Like, it's not realistic for everybody to invest the time into the hobby to get to that level of comic cleaning, because they may only have 2 books they want cleaned. You know, and that we're talking, you know, 6 months of just figuring out how to clean them before you can do that. So figure out where your level is. If you're a modern collector, you know, figure out your modern collecting needs. If you're a vintage collector, figure out your vintage collecting needs. If you want to go out there and try to find all the stained books in the world and make them not stained books, you know, figure out your needs for that. But every opportunity to learn, those are the kinds that you need to go to. Those are the kinds of communities you really need to strive to get into, and just keep an open mind.
And I don't want to ignore the fact that there are professionals like Barry who he's not an artisan, he's a professional, right? Barry, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, yeah. So I mean, I get my information. The community helps us understand the applied research, what they're doing with what's out there, and what's possible, right? I mean, Picasso was at his best when he was competing with another artist. It's the ability to, and tools like Instagram and YouTube, not the internet, makes it possible to see what's achievable. The heights to scale are within sight. Many times in the past they weren't. You didn't even know what could be done. And we were all dismissive. But I will say again, if you stick with the videos and the internet, you're missing out. Most of us, unfortunately, are the blind leading the blind. Okay, there's no comic pressing school. There's no comic pressing academy. It's all self-taught in most cases. It's still a hobby in a lot of cases. It's going to change. That's why we're here. We see the change. But the point is that if all you do is work as amateurs, you're going to get more risk in your results. The people who know how to do this for a living, they go to school for it. They are art restorers. They are professional conservators. They are art museum curators. And they are scientists, chemists, and chemical engineers who work in the paper industry, printing and packaging, etc. I've had the benefit of going to art school. I cannot tell you how many things I can use to clean a colored bright yellow or bright red area that Charles has not mentioned. No worries. God bless you, right? I'm saying like that nobody in the community talks about. And like, for example, we would never use this absarine. I see it all the time. We don't use it ever. It sticks to stuff. If you don't use it right, it's a problem. In a lot of cases, we just never use it.
The putty.
Thanks. The putty. Right.
Oh yeah, no. That was one of the first things that got the axe on kits that I use too. Because yeah, I mean, you get it in the wrong surface, and yeah, you've got pink putty and fibers and.
But the point is, but that there's this, they make a sponge that's wonderful for certain circumstances. But so what we're doing is we're watching the community, because there's no question. Again, the recent stain removal techniques that have been introduced through literature and online, they're game changing. But they're using the same light bleaching properties that have been published since 1945 in white papers. Rick's cited the paper. So the properties are known, but we can't say we don't know what to do with them. It's great that these people are doing it, but most of the stuff you see on the internet is designed to clean a book, 2 books. We're not about that. We're about cleaning hundreds or thousands of books systematically, each a vintage treasure, each with care, due diligence, insurance, and caution. But nonetheless, you can't have a business if everything's a work of art. So we study the artistry from papers and what's in our curriculum and things like that. We study the applied research and the practice of the community that people are doing. We read what we can. And then we're taking stuff from car restorers and art restorers and anybody who is conserving or restoring surfaces including seamstresses, people who put together wedding dresses. I mean, have you ever tried to deal with a stain on a white dress right before a wedding? I mean, there's genius going on, and how you remove stains from white fabric. Well,
Sounds stressful.
that's just as insightful when you're cleaning white. It's still cellulosic material. It's still cotton. I mean, so I'm just saying. I mean, if you think about what our stuff's made of, and all the artistry that goes cleaning surfaces in our lives, we try to learn from everybody who cleans, as well as everybody who is an artist who deals with paper. And then who's a manufacturer and manufactures tools to deal with paper. So my favorite place to get supplies is the art supply store. And so just to be clear, now that could be Amazon, and it's so many other things, but art supply stores are really, really good places. And you asked a couple other places. We like Talus. So Talus is because art archivists and conservators store. It's a New York based, and there are others like Talus. Talus is sometimes their prices are higher. There's a Museum Services Corporation or Museum Conservation Corporation that makes equipment and devices. There's a few others. PEL, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, is another thing that sells all types of chemistries and stuff. And so when they sell it, when the stores that are the best in the world for art restoration are selling this stuff, you don't have to poo-poo it. What you have to do is understand it. Well, why would an art restorer ever put this on a Michelangelo? Maybe I can use it on a comic, Well, what would I do? So we like Talus because Talus explains this is what this is and this is what it's for. So we're reading the websites, the product catalogs of these sites. We learn what's out there and what it could do. Not it's expensive, though. It's an expensive hobby to be in. So we love learning from people. Last thing I'll say is befriend the two most accessible types of people you can in your community who will know a lot, believe it or not. Artists and librarians. Both of these types of people are very easy to talk to. Often they like to talk about their craft, and both artists and librarians are skilled at cleaning paper, handling stains on paper, and dealing with old materials that need to be used in new circumstances. So here are some tips that we're using to learn, and of course we're learning from each and every one of you who are here on the call and watching.
Well, that's great. I want to give you guys each a chance to say one more thing that you want to say about the world in general, of anything you do, and then also how can we find you? Because I'm going to put this in our show notes at the bottom of the description as well. But what do you want to say? What are you going to get off your chest, Charles? And also, how can we find you?
So I'll start with how you find me. Hobby Hero on YouTube. I do post regular content on YouTube. Instagram is at hobbyhero_bros. As far as, what I would tell anybody who's out there who is pressing is, it is absolutely a very rewarding career path to choose if you're in the hobby, regardless of what level you get to. I mean, my brother is also into comics. He could not tell you the first thing about wet cleaning a comic book, but he really enjoys just pressing like his modern books, getting them to look flat, clean, and professionally, like right off the press. It's extremely rewarding at every level that you get into it. It's very therapeutic, but it is time consuming. That is one thing I will warn everybody. The 15 to 20 minute videos you see are usually like 4 to 5 days of compressed footage. So it is time consuming, but for at least me personally, it is an extremely rewarding process. I would highly recommend you at least look at it if you've been thinking about it.
Good. Thanks, Barry. What do you want to say, and how can we get a hold of you?
Okay, well, you can get a hold of me at comicpresser.com, comic_presser on Instagram. Those are the two best channels to reach us or see our work. More coming. I have a big collection, which is where all this started. And again, some great people I've gotten to work with, and I love meeting new and interesting people. But this hobby forces us all to be experts in the mythology, in the pricing, and the grading, and now in the science of cleaning. If you sat through all this and gotten this far, or you scrubbed all the way here. And, all I can say is that some of us are building collections that are for us, but we don't want to stick our wife and our kids with something that isn't market ready to transfer. Someday they don't want it. And the reality is, they may appreciate what we love about it and they see us happy. But if that collection isn't ready to move when someone doesn't want it, you won't get the full value. And you'd hate it if you spent all that money on it. And the person who knew the least about it was the one responsible for transferring. Cleaning and pressing and grading, while it is a game that forces you to develop expertise, is a responsible way to organize collections for the next generation, because when they don't want it, it's easier to move at market value. And if they do want it, it's protected, it's organized, it's curated in a way where they can enjoy it and safely and responsibly, because you're not touching it. Well, some slabs are good in one respect and bad in another. But ultimately, yet condition is the name of the game. And so mastering condition of comics is the way to maximize value. And over time, I think all of us expect that comics will continue to grow as the mythology gets more and more exposure around the world. So just so excited to be part of it, to meet great people like, again, Rick Charles and others, heroes mine, really. I mean, watching them, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. And oh, I want to meet them. And and having the courage to try it yourself, which I encourage everybody to do, or the courage to say, you know what, let's let the pro handle that. My job is to find it, to make it valuable and clean it, get it graded, and to make sure my family or my next owner knows how to capture the most value from it. So that's what excites me, and we'll continue to do so. Rick, again, thanks for having me.
Great, thanks. I'm going to say goodbye in a minute, but I want to say that, this is a passion for me too. I share your anxiety when the thrill of victory and agony of defeat over cleaning the books, and it's a great thing. And I've met the most interesting people from all over the world. And I've been all over the world and met people. Strangely, I don't have that many followers. I seem to run into people who will see you and just really want to talk about comic books in the airport or somewhere. And it always warms my heart. I'm like, you're at a disadvantage because you feel like you know me, but I don't know you at all. But it's like there's a kinship. This group of people are friends. They're happy people who love what they're doing. They have a passion for what they're doing. They want to talk about what they're doing. And I think for me, this is another avenue to keep the hobby alive. I think that this pressing and cleaning, this making things market ready, as Barry said. So if I'm thinking about, like, if I die some way, what happens to all my AF-15s? Is my wife just going to give them to the neighbor kid or something?
Die.
Yeah. So I think about stuff like that. But this is a way to get people interested who didn't grow up on the books, which we've always feared since the 90s, that once all those golden age kids died, that we wouldn't have anybody to buy it. It turns out to be false. It turns out to be that the hobby has survived that, and people who never read these books. Also, we said slabbing books was going to kill the hobby because people can't read them. Ends up that's not true either. People aren't as interested in reading them as I had expected all along. So my expectations were broken. There's a new avenue to enjoy this hobby, and I'm happy that it has pulled more people in. So I'm going to say goodnight, gentlemen. I really appreciate you. It's wonderful to talk to you. We could probably do this for hours, but I'm trying to keep this under an hour. And we'll have to do this again. I feel
absolutely.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks
Take
for
care,
having me.
everyone. All right. Bye-bye.